I'm sorry that I'm jumping all over everywhere. I wanted to do this all in order, this 383 rebuild, but instead, start to finish, tear it down. But it's not working right. But anyway, let's just proceed. I didn't chamfer when you bore an engine, you should chamfer the top of the cylinders here to help the rings go in. This is a pretty sharp corner right here. This is just a cone you get from Goodson or anybody. Just enough to get rid of that sharp edge will be enough. And like usual, both of these plugs on each side and one on the back don't want to come out, so I'm going to have to weld a nut on here and take them out with a wrench. I never said I was a good welder, by the way. We just hope it gets the job done. That felt good. Yeah. Well, I guess I lied. I'll brush it clean and do it all over again. This is where we were supposed to be starting this series, where we're got the block cleaned or stripped, we've got the cam bearings out, we've got the freeze plugs out, we've got all the oil plugs out and the water plugs out. This block set the record for how much time I can spend on getting those 3 plugs out. It was really rather shocking. So now, where do you want to go from here? There's certain things that you don't have to do. You just do because you want to, or you want to do a better job, or, it may not need these things, but I like to chase all the threads. And if you just took the motor out of the car yesterday, you pretty much know all the threads are good. You took it apart, everything seemed good. But a lot of people start with a bare block that they bought somewhere or that's been sitting underneath the house for the last 40 years. This one came out of a school bus. And it's a April 70 casting. I guess no wonder the plugs were stuck after 55 years. I guess so. But when I clean these threads, when I chase these threads, long time ago I used to tap these holes, but I don't do that anymore because I feel I don't want to remove any metal. I just want to clean the threads out. And sometimes when you're dragging these blocks in, some of these are going to be rusted up, or they're going to have mud daubers in them, or you're going to have to, that's not going to want to go through there. That's just a little clean out thing. And when that won't do it, you get what's called a clean out tap. This is not a tap for making threads, or it would have 4 flutes, and you can see this has 3. This gives you more room for the dirt to go when you're trying to tap this out. So I have to have this with me when I'm doing this, because if I find one that one won't cut it, then I use this and a tap wrench, and just it'll clean it right out. There's nothing wrong with the threads. There's just mud, rust, dirt, whatever in there. And so just use this and clean it up. I can't do this afterwards because I won't be able to remember which ones didn't go all the way through. So I have to do this at the same time. I usually squirt a little bit of WD-40 in there. But I chase every thread on the block just because you don't have to. And now you need to clean these out because, you know, when I got these plugs out, there's that big wall of crud behind it, about that thick. So you have to kind of knock that out of there and then run a pipe tap through there. And that's a fairly popular pipe tap size. If you don't have one, you can buy a cheap one and you'll use it the rest of your life. I mean, there's only 3 different sizes on here normally, unless you got a 1/2-inch pickup. But anyway, just clean up the threads and everything. And then now I know this is supposed to be a stock rebuild and you're not even supposed to check the main bore and things like that, but we'll go ahead and check that just for fun and see how it is in accordance with what it's supposed to be. And I do try to clean these core plug holes out. You know, when you knock those out, there's going to be a layer of gooey behind the back there where the freeze plug was, and you can get one of these that's just the right size that'll fit in there. A steel brush shouldn't remove any metal. You're not going to damage the block or anything. Just stick it in there and clean that back lip back there where all the trash is. I forgot to tell you that clean out tap was a ARP, and that chaser is just a Chinesium that you get most anywhere. Get a whole kit of them for a few bucks. Now I realize this is a stock rebuild and that you don't really have to go to this extent. I mean, anybody else, you just tear it down and you put in new bearings and you put it back together, and you might check it with plastic gauge and know that your clearance is kind of pretty close to what you wanted and go. But some people want to do a little more or look a little more or play a little more. I mean, they're having fun with their car. And so we get into stuff like this sometimes where either for your own entertainment or to do a better job. You know, every time you do something, you know, you try to get better than the last time you did it. And so we'll just try to pick up your game a little bit or something, you know. So you take the main caps off, and the reason for this is you can't measure the main bores until you know that the main caps are on properly and they're torqued down. And when you got that block, it may have just had the main caps on it. Well, you can't torque them down not knowing if there's any dirt under the caps that would give you a erroneous reading. So you take the main caps off, you clean out the threads, you blow out the threads, and then you get something like a little Chinese file like this, and just make sure there's nothing sticking up here. Use your finger first. See, that doesn't feel good right there. But you're just trying to make sure there's nothing sticking up here that's going to give you an erroneous reading when you measure your bores. You're not trying to remove any metal here. You're just feeling around. Is there anything here that could cause me a problem? And then you put the main cap on and torque it down as you're going to torque it down when you do your final assembly. So this will be a stock rebuild, stock bolts, so that's with regular motor oil as lubricant. And then torque them all down, and we'll get some numbers. And the only reason for this, the only reason you want to know your main bore size, other than, I mean, I worked on a block for a long time once, getting it ready for a bracket racer, I know. I didn't check the main bore first, and when I got done and flipped it over to do the mains, guess what? One of them had spun the main, and the block was junk. And I did a whole lot of work for nothing. Not a good day, or days I should say. But anyway, you want to get an accurate reading here when you measure. So that way when you measure your bearing clearance, you know that if it's not right, either high or low, it's not because that your main bore was the wrong size. You put the bearing in a bore that was the right size. So from here, it's up to the bearing and of course the crankshaft, but assume the crankshaft is what it's supposed to be. It's up to the bearing to give you the right clearance. So you have to have a good man. Now I know these things will run with just about any kind of clearance here. So in reality, it doesn't matter. You're doing this just because you want to know. I mean, they put together 1 million of these 383s. As a matter of fact, that might be literally. And they're all fine. It's not going to be a problem here. We're just doing this to expand our knowledge base and to give us a warm and fuzzy feeling about what we're doing. I'll go ahead and clean up the rest of these and torque them down to the factory specs, and then we'll just measure to see where we're at, and I'm sure everything's going to be fine. Even if it was a little off. A 383 is not going to blow up just because it is a little off, but inquiring minds want to know. And after you do these main saddles, you can look at your caps the same way and just feel of them, see if you feel any bad spots. Sometimes you'll see some taps on here from cap walking if it's been in a high horsepower race application, which a 383 shouldn't be in, but you know how it is. But do the same thing to the caps, look at them. If it was a higher performance build, maybe we would touch that with a chamfer just to get rid of that sharp edge. Same way here. But another thing, when you put this cap on, these holes have to be clean. If they're not clean, then as you put the bolt in, something can fall down and get in between the cap and the saddle here, and now you're not going to get an accurate reading. So make sure your holes are brushed out before you go putting them on. Cleanliness, right? Over and over. When you put on this number 3 main cap, this is the thrust bearing, and so you want to make sure that this is lined up real good. Rub your finger right there. It appears to me that it's a little this way. The cap is a little that way. You want to get this lined up good. When you put it together, you want that lined up, and we'll go over that when we're putting it together. But it appears to me that feels a little bit. You could actually see it right there, and now that feels perfect. So torque it down and feel it again, but it shouldn't move once you get it perfect like that. I've torqued the main caps down to the factory service manual spec of 85 foot-pounds. I don't know if I put oil underneath the head of the bolts where they meet the cap. I don't know if the service manual says to do that or not, but that's what I do. So to measure the main bores, there's several ways, of course. The regular inside micrometer is fine. That only gets you to within 1 thou, but nonetheless, you can read on there if you're in the range or not. And you can use these telescoping gauges, snap gauges, whatever somebody calls. It takes a while to get good with these. I don't even know if I'm there yet, but you just lock it down and then take it out and measure it with your micrometer. You should have micrometers anyway. And then measure it and see what you've got. Now you're going to have to do that a few times. It has to be in there straight. And it takes a little while to get used to, but you can get there. And of course the dial bore gauge is my favorite. We don't have to know within a tenth, do we? Seeing as how I'm lazy, I'm just going to use the regular hole mic. I think of these really being for a perfectly round hole because of the way they measure, but for what we're doing, we should be able to find out what we want to know. The spec on these is 2.818 on the high side, and they give you a half a thou to play with. And that is 2.818. So right on the money, which is, I consider that normal for a Mopar to hit these right on the money on the high side. 2.817 3/4, still within the spec. 2.7 I need to be writing these down because I can't remember this stuff. In reality, you're supposed to write everything down when you're working on an engine, but in reality, this will never apply because we know that they were in spec. That is 7 3/4. Typical Mopar. 818. Okay, so now when we get around to checking our main bearing clearances, we know that we don't have to think about this ever again. They're all in spec, and I will lay a straight edge in there just to make sure that they all appear to be in line. Lay a straight edge in, try to slip a 1,000 feeler gauge under it, and I'm sure it's going to be fine, but I will do that too.